Hey, friends! Just so you know, we enjoy the swear word and we rely on good old fashioned humor to get through some seriously dark subject matter. At no time do we intend any disrespect toward the victims or families of the victims in the cases we cover. Also, be sure to listen to the end for a few palate cleansing bloopers to reset your mindset. And with that, we thank you for listening and we hope you enjoy. Hey, friends, welcome to Crime Will Tell. I'm Carrie,
And I'm Jamie.
and we're back for another edition of CWT.
Yeah, what you got there?
Bourbon today. I got my bourbon today. My trusty standby, my trusty dusty old friend, Azel Bay Hay. Nope. Azel Bay Aidenhay. Azel Bay Aidenhay. Got it.
Yeah.
And what are you gracing your lips with?
I am trying another bourbon from my Bourbon Lovers gift that I got from Patty. So this is Rebel 100, but it's apparently defiantly smooth wheated bourbon.
Defiantly smooth.
Yeah.
I feel like I want to be known as defiantly smooth.
Yeah. So, but it's pretty tasty and I am drinking it with some Sprite today because it's hot.
It is hot. It's beautiful, but it's hot.
Yes, it's hot.
All right. Well, cheers, my friend.
Cheers. Clink.
Clink. Okay, so I went rogue again for today's case.
God damn it.
Yeah, we don't have murder today. What
Okay.
we've got ourselves a good old fashioned stalking. We've got some serious she said.
Oh, okay.
We also aren't really sure who was being stalked.
What?
Yeah, we weren't sure who actually was doing the stalking. I'm interested in your perspective after I share the details.
Okay.
I went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And I think I finally, possibly, maybe, perhaps landed on who I believe was doing the stalking, allegedly. So I'm curious as to what you're going to think at the end.
Okay. This sounds interesting.
Now, this case has been covered by so many podcasts. So we like to
Really?
go, yes, we like
Okay.
to stick to mostly, for the most part, obscure cases that don't have limelights that, we want to bring a voice to the victims. But I hadn't heard of this case until I happened upon a forensic files episode I hadn't seen before, which certainly got my attention because I thought I had seen every single episode 6 times. But this one, I saw this and I was like, "What? This is so interesting." This case was covered in season 2, episode 10, titled Sealed with a Kiss.
Oh my.
Fun fact, this case was covered way back when Forensic Files was still called Medical Detectives.
Oh damn.
Dun, dun, dun. They had the music where it was like, it goes down. It's intended to instigate, like, it's like supposed to be like crazy and it's bad stuff. Even though this case has certainly been covered, it's still rather obscure because I don't ever hear anyone talk about it. It's not like you say, "Oh, Joanne Chambers," or Paula Nawrocki. Those are the names of the 2 individuals in this case. And people are like, "Oh, yeah, that case. That was crazy, huh?" Like,
Fucking
nobody.
Paula. Bleh.
God damn it, Joanne. But it's still rather obscure. And I wonder if it's because there isn't really any legitimate violence that takes place. Now, there is a little bit of, but not legitimate, like hardcore violence. And we don't end up with a dead body.
And that's okay.
It's great, but people are drawn to gore, blood, murder. You know what I mean?
Right.
So we're stepping back in time, just a short jaunt back to 1993.
Mm,
We're
okay.
situated in Tobyhanna, Pennsylvania. Joanne Chambers teaches reading to first graders at the Coolbaugh Learning Center, which is
Fine.
a public elementary school within the Pocono Mountain School District. That is located in eastern Pennsylvania. So, like if you have a map of Pennsylvania, it's in the eastern part of the state, and that's where Tobyhanna is located.
Okay.
So Chambers has been teaching in the school district for about 8 years, but at Coolbaugh Learning Center for about 4 years. So she's been there for quite some time. And she was a popular teacher. She was a little bit unconventional. And I think that's why she was so popular, especially amongst parents and students. She was really creative in her teaching ways. And if you think about the early 90s, creative teachers that went on, like that, like went outside the box and were like super, non-traditional, that was kind of frowned upon. It was still back in the day, at least that I was in high school then. And back in the day, like traditional teaching methods was the way it was.
Right. Yeah, it was great for kids, but faculty and parents didn't necessarily appreciate that kind
Non-traditional
of.
teachers, yeah, creative teachers. She used dancing and singing a lot to
Oh,
teach her first graders. I mean, they're 6 years old. Who doesn't love to dance and sing at 6 years old?
me.
She was creative, she was fun, she laughed all the time. She would always, like, hug her students, and at the end of every day, she would look at them and say, "You make my heart happy."
Aw,
Isn't that sweet?
that
And as a
is.
six-year-old, you're like, "I do? Oh my god, I love you so much." It was almost like she was a big kid at her own heart, right? She was 46 years old at the time, and she was still a big kid at her heart. She would put on squirt gun and water balloon fights with the school faculty and staff, and the
Fuck
children
yeah.
fucking loved it. They thought it was the best thing to watch the adults cream each other with squirt guns and water balloons.
Can you not say cream each other? That just
Ah,
sounds
why? Why not, Jamie? Chambers was highly respected. She was highly regarded by faculty and staff, parents, the community. And her record, her teaching record, her educator record was unblemished.
Okay.
On a normal, ordinary school day in 1993, several envelopes addressed to the principal of Coolbaugh Learning Center were strewn about the grounds of the school. So they were like outside. They were like shoved into the mail slot. Remember mail slots indoors?
Yeah.
Yeah, they were shoved in there. They were strewn all around the ground in front of the front door to the building, in bushes, all along the lawn. There was like it was like Hogwarts owls got out and just fucking
Littered?
annihilated, littered. They
Ugh.
littered. So all these envelopes had the same piece of paper inside. It was a typed note containing serious claims and allegations against Joanne Chambers.
Okay.
Quote, Chambers brought pot into school and then showed it in the faculty room just like it was a big joke.
What's wrong with that?
A little ganja on school grounds is frowned upon, especially in an elementary school, right?
Eh,
So, not cool. The letter contained sexual lewdness as well as a couple of violent threats directed towards Chambers. It was anonymous. There was no postage, no return address, no identifying information on any of the envelopes. And this suggested that they must have been personally handled by whoever put them there. They weren't put
okay.
through the mail system or anything like that. This event was the first of what turned out to be many instances that would occur over the course of about 18 months to Chambers.
Wow. Okay.
And very quickly, the situation escalated. Whoever was behind this attack turned to mailing lewd and threatening letters directly to Chambers at her home address, as well as to Coolbaugh Learning Center directly. So now they're going through the post.
Jesus. Okay.
There's still no return address. They're not signed. There's no identifying information to suggest who's behind this, but now they're going through the post. One letter had, quote, I can get you in one try. No one will ever prove it. They may not think so, but I'm smarter than all of you, you stupid bitch.
Whoa.
Now, other teachers at the school were also starting to directly receive letters about Chambers. They were being mailed to the school and then put into the faculty inboxes in the front office. It was clear there seemed to be a full on smear campaign against Chambers. Everybody's being inundated with all these really lewd and violent and vicious and awful letters saying awful things about Chambers, which was odd because she was so well liked. Her reputation as a teacher and a member of her community, it was impeccable. It didn't take long for the entire town to know what was going on. And naturally, there was an ass ton of buzz about the letters. I mean,
Yeah.
it's salacious. Who wouldn't be like, oh my God, did you hear about the letter against Chambers? So there was a lot of buzz about the letters. There was a lot of buzz about whether or not any of the allegations in the letters were true. And soon, as humans do, rumors and innuendo were flying.
Of course.
And she basically went from living a nice, lovely life to living in a fishbowl where everyone was watching her every move. And I can imagine that had to have been quite unnerving. And what is extremely bothersome was that she had a husband and a 10-year-old.
Mm,
So she had a 10-year-old son, and they were collateral damage because they were right in the line of fire and seeing everything that was happening to their
right.
mom and wife and how it was making her feel. Could you imagine?
No, and I'm sure other kids are probably saying shit to her son and whatever.
He's right at that age where he could understand what was going on, especially if he was allowed to know anything that was going on in the letters,
Oh, for
right?
sure. Yeah.
Chambers said she also started receiving hang up calls at her house as well as calls that were threatening to burn down her home, but she couldn't
Fuck.
identify any voices. One of the letters told faculty members to look in Chambers' classroom desk drawer because they'd find empty liquor bottles in there because she had a drinking problem and she would often drink on the job around children.
So she's just drinking and smoking and
Apparently, she's just drinking and going, let's sing our ABCs, kids.
yeah. Who wants to
ABCD.
dance, my
Yeah.
little babies? Oh.
And after this letter was anonymously distributed, Chambers indeed, one day, she found an empty whiskey bottle in her classroom desk drawer. And she's like, I did not put this here. I did not drink this. I had no knowledge of where this bottle came from and who put it in my desk, but it wasn't me. This was also when Chambers realized that some of her personal items that were on her desk had been stolen. Specifically, a framed picture of her and her son and two friends that she really cherished, and she had it on her
Hmm.
desk. It seemed like someone was insanely jealous of Chambers, like insanely jealous of her. And it seemed like it was a fellow faculty member who was on a mission because it was centered at the school and it was inside her classroom.
Right.
So
Yeah.
somebody had to have had access. Authorities particularly thought this since the distribution of the letters also seemed to center around the school, and since the contents of the letters regularly accused Chambers of untoward and unrespectable like behavior while on school grounds.
Right. Yeah.
And as the smear campaign pressed on, finally, authorities got what they thought could be a clue from one of the letters. In this particular letter, there was a demeaning reference to the school's superintendent. He was referred to as Colonel Clink. And I was like, okay, how is this an insult? So I looked up who is Colonel Clink. Colonel Clink is a German commander character in the Hogan's Heroes TV series. Now,
Oh.
Hogan's Heroes was on, like, it debuted in 1965 and it ran through like 1972. And I'm like, okay, well, why is that bad? So I'm like, why is it bad to be known as Colonel Clink? And on the internets, what I had found was that this character was described as, quote, bungling, cowardly, conceited, and self serving.
Ah.
And I was
Okay.
like, yeah, that would not be cool to be referred to as Colonel Clink. And
That's
also,
insulting as fuck. Yeah.
bungling is a great insult. That's
It really
great. It's
is.
unassuming, but fuck, it stings.
Yeah. Quit bungling around, fucker.
I actually really like that. So I think we've got ourselves a new insult, you fucking bungler. So the reason why this Colonel Clink reference was a clue was because a fellow teacher had remembered a conversation she had had with another Cool Ball Learning Center first grade teacher, where that teacher made the same exact reference when talking about the school superintendent. So in that conversation, they're like, yeah. And she's like, oh, yeah, he's a fucking Colonel Clink. You know what I'm
Oh
saying?
my god. Okay.
And this teacher's name, who allegedly called the superintendent Colonel Clink, her name was Paula Nawrocki.
Oh
Paula
shoot.
Nawrocki, who had been teaching in the Pocono Mountain School District for almost 2 decades, was also a first grade teacher at Cool Ball Learning Center.
Mm. But did she dance and sing?
She did not dance and sing.
Ah,
Mhm,
I knew
mhm.
it.
You're on something. No dancing and singing in Nawrocki's classroom, and she had a classroom situated close to Chambers' classroom, and they taught in the same building. So, could this be a clue? Sure, but still it's shaky. It's
Yeah,
shaky. The investigators were like, "We're just gonna pull on any thread that we can," which they
yeah,
should, right?
yeah, exactly.
Now, while the onslaught of letters continued, the unknown perpetrator decided it was time to take their smear campaign next level. So one school day, as Chambers prepared to start her lesson for her room full of eagerly anticipating first graders who just love education, she pulled out her desk chair at her desk and she sat down. She had a dress on. And you know how like when women sit down, they'll kind of like sit like squat up a little bit and smooth the dress down underneath them so that it's completely down. It's not all like your ass isn't hanging out on the chair kind of thing.
Right, yeah.
So this is what she did. She smoothed the underside of her dress down her thighs and she felt something on her hands. And she was like, "What?" So she raised her hands to look at what's on her hands and she realized that she had shit all over her hands. Someone had smeared shit all over the seat of her chair.
Oh, fuck no.
She had shit all over the back of her dress, her hands. She was literally covered in shit.
Ah,
Straight up fucking poopies. Okay.
hmm.
This has really turned
This
into a smear
makes me
campaign.
very uncomfortable. Shits me.
So, can you imagine the classroom full of first graders were fucking captivated about what?
They're like,
Oh my gosh, Miss Chambers, what happened? I can't
you
even.
pooped your
Did you
pants.
poop all over the chair? Okay, people don't always look at the seat of the chair in which they are about to sit. I get that.
Mhm.
I don't. But my first question was when I was researching this case and I read this account of what happened, I was like, why didn't she smell the shit?
That's
And
what
why
I
didn't
was
that
thinking.
shit smell make her look around for like, why the fuck does it smell like shit in here? Because if there was that much shit on her seat where she was like covered in it,
Mm.
how could she not smell that? She would have fucking
Yeah,
smelled it. You would have smelled that shit walking into the room.
right, exactly.
Shit fucking stinks. We all know that. We all know the shit smell. And as soon as we smell it, we look at each other and we're like, it fucking smells like shit in here. Where's that smell coming from? And you start an investigation.
Who pooped?
Which one of you fucking shit your pants? Which one of you? Go to the office. Anyway, I don't know. Maybe she doesn't have a sense of smell. Maybe no one has a sense of smell. Or maybe,
Maybe it
I mean,
was magic poop, who knows? Maybe it
I
had
don't
aired
know.
out, it had been sitting there long enough that
Well, it was an I guess
uh,
I guess maybe the top layer could have been crusted over. The look on your face. I wish everybody could see the look on
this
your face right now.
this
You're like
makes me
about to gag.
I am such a germaphobe. This is like my worst nightmare. And my thoughts are like the pink soap in those elementary school bathrooms is not going to
Oh,
touch
nope.
the cleanliness that I would need. I would need to boil my hands.
She had a shitstorm on her hands.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the letters continued. The entire school was fucking consumed with rumors, gossip, everyone turning into armchair detectives, trying to put the puzzle pieces of this Scooby Doo mystery together. And my assumption from researching this case is that this was less about people wanting to actually figure out what was going on, who was behind it, why they're doing it. And it was much more about the delight of gossiping about Chambers. And as these letters continued, like the thread of violence, that thread started to really creep in and become very, what's the word I'm looking for? It started to become a regular occurrence in the letters.
Yeah.
And things
Mm.
like, quote, you really are a clueless bitch. I come right out and tell you how stupid you are, and you keep on doing the same stuff. I had 4 chances to drug your coffee this week. Or did I drug your coffee?
What the
Bitch, you
fuck?
make me sick. Yeah, so stuff like that. So now we've got threats of poisoning.
Wow.
A matter of days after that particular letter made its debut on the letter runway, a hidden camera that had been installed inside Chambers' classroom because they kind of wanted to be like, what the fuck is going on here? Let's go ahead and put a camera in. Let's catch this perpetrator. They caught an image that piqued investigators' attention. And they were like, oh, okay, well, what is this? So the grainy footage captured a few different teachers entering and exiting Chambers' empty classroom for various reasons. None of them stayed long. It's like they came in, they picked up some construction paper and they left. They came in, they dropped a book off and they left, stuff like that. No one person spent any significant amount of time in the classroom or seemed to be doing anything nefarious or acting suspiciously. Nawrocki was one of those teachers that came into the classroom. The camera captured her entering Chambers' classroom, walking directly to her desk, grabbing her coffee mug, and then leaving the classroom with the mug. And she seemed at ease. Nawrocki seemed at ease. She wasn't acting like she was up to something. She didn't look around to see if anybody had seen her take the mug. She didn't seem like she was nervous about anything. It was like she was completely natural and unassuming, and there was nothing, untoward about her just walking in, grabbing the mug and walking out. Yet this did happen shortly after the letter that suggested her coffee could have been poisoned multiple times over the course of that week had been sent to everybody.
Right.
So you got this letter, and now you've got camera footage of Nawrocki going into an empty classroom and taking her Chambers' mug. So
Okay.
the investigators were like, well, what the fuck is this? This is
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah. If Nawrocki was behind this, it was completely out of character for her. So she was about as opposite of Chambers as you could get, not only in
Okay.
looks, but in teaching style. So Chambers was very tall, blonde hair, green eyes, expressive, very loose, very untraditional teaching methods, and extroverted and outgoing. Nawrocki was just as well guarded and respected as Chambers, but she was known as a by the book teacher and a strict disciplinarian. She followed the rules, she taught very traditionally, and she taught very well. She was very organized, she had her plans, she didn't go off the cuff, and she followed the letter to the T. Her teaching style literally couldn't have been any different than Chambers, but it really worked for her because parents and teachers really liked her. Students thrived under her tutelage, and she had been a successful educator for years. And fellow teachers described Nawrocki as diplomatic, honest, peaceful, kind, nice, caring. Another teacher that had been teaching for almost 2 decades with an impeccable reputation and educational record.
Okay.
So the portions of the photo that had been stolen from Chambers' desk, remember that framed photo of her, her
Mhm.
son, and two friends?
Yeah.
Portions of this photo, specifically Chambers's head, her face, that had been cut out of the photo, made a magical and shocking reappearance.
Mm.
Someone had cut out Chambers' face from that photo and had pasted her face onto several different nudie magazine photos,
What the fuck?
all of which looked like they had come from like a Playboy or a I'm trying to think of all the nudie magazines that were in play in the early 90s. There's Playboy,
Hustler.
Hustler, that's the other one I was thinking of. Anywhoozle, all of these pictures had come from some kind of magazine like that. And so somebody took these pictures and pasted her face from that photo, and they made copies of that photo's face and like they put it on all these nudie pictures, and then they sent all these pictures out to everybody.
Oh my
So
god.
these homemade doctored photos were mailed to parents' homes. They were hung on the front windows of a store in town.
What? Like missing posters?
Yeah, just
Oh my
I'm
god.
missing this boobies. Can anybody find these boobies? I'm sorry. I'm making a little light of this. Stalking is not fun. I've been a victim of stalking. It is fucking terrifying, but we don't have any death or dying in this case, so I'm gonna make it a little light because next episode won't be light. Let's be real. Anyway, Chambers was fucking mortified.
Well, yeah.
Mortified, rightfully so. I would have been like, "Yeah, those are my boobies. What are you gonna do about it?"
Yeah.
But
Don't I look
she wasn't.
great?
The situation had officially turned in a goddamn train wreck that no one could look away from. The community was losing their damn minds about this.
Well, yeah.
And for good measure, on the heels of these lewd photos being distributed, someone started making anonymous phone calls to various parents. accusing Chambers of being gay and that she had AIDS and that she shouldn't be teaching their children.
The fuck?
This was the part in my researching that I got I got angry. I hate that being gay or having AIDS were things that were used to suggest that somebody was a horrible person. That just
Right.
fucking irritates me. That shit still happens today. I fucking hate it so hard. But people were responding to that.
Right. Yeah.
And it, it bothers me. Anyway, of course, Chambers felt violated. It was an attack against her. So I
Right.
get
For
it.
sure. Yeah.
And yet, investigators still had no leads. They had really no other really relevant clues to go off of except for that footage of Nawrocki going into Chambers's classroom and grabbing that coffee mug and that Colonel Clink insult.
Right.
These two things did certainly make the investigators sit up a little straighter. It was still shaky, entirely circumstantial, but it was something. And
Yeah.
otherwise, they didn't have anything. And Nawrocki, she was moved to another building at the school because they're like, we don't know what the fuck is going on, but let's just go ahead and separate these two. So she was moved to another building at the school to continue teaching in order for her and Chambers to be separated and like reduce any friction if Nawrocki really was behind this. And by this point, Nawrocki was also beginning to be snubbed by fellow teachers who were convinced that she was behind everything that was going on.
Wow.
So
Okay.
she was starting to become a pariah at the school and in the community.
Mm.
Then there was the pink box,
What?
not that pink box, rather, a box that was in pink wrapping paper that had been placed on the ground in front of the school entrance.
Okay.
Inside this pink box was a Barbie doll.
Um,
It had blonde hair that had been arranged in the same style and length as Chambers' blonde hair, and it wore a blue dress that closely resembled one Chambers wore.
did it have poop on the back?
No. For accessories, though, it stylishly had a razor blade sticking out of its throat
Jesus
and had red
Christ.
paint all over the razor blade and dribbled down the front of the dress to represent blood.
Oh my God.
And speaking of razor blades, another
Mm.
incident that occurred one day after work, Chambers walked to her car to drive home. It had been a long day. She was fucking tired. She wanted to go home, spend some time with her family, have some dinner, and go to goddamn bed. That's all she wanted to do. And as she approached the driver's side door of her car in the school's parking lot, she unlocked it and she put her hand under the door handle and pulled up to open the door. It took a few seconds for her to realize that her fingers had been badly cut.
Oh
Someone had hidden a razor blade up underneath her door handle
my God.
to hurt her. She ended up going to the emergency room and she ended up with 8 stitches
Jesus.
in her fingers. Yeah. A few days after this incident, Chambers received another anonymous letter that talked about the razor blade hidden in her car's door handle and that she had been, quote, was sliced. So investigators decided to send the letters, all of the ones they could round up, to the FBI in Quantico, Virginia. They're like, look, can you Phoebes do anything with your spidey skills to discover any more clues with these letters than what we've been able to do? Our thinking is yes. So can you just go ahead and work on this? And while the FBI did find portions of fingerprints, DNA testing was still in its infancy. So if the letters and envelopes had any other secrets to share, they remained elusive. On May 6th, 1994, almost a year after this whole smear campaign started, in an effort to advance the investigation, authorities at the Coolbaugh Township Police Department, despite very limited evidence and no real leads, decided to give Chambers a polygraph to validate the various claims she had been making and to just ensure that she hadn't been embellishing anything. You know what? They're just like, at this point, they're just like, let's just do anything we can. They didn't
Yeah.
were for a second believe that Chambers had anything to do with this and they felt really bad for her, but they're like, let's do something. Everyone saw the letters and doctored photos. Parents confirmed the anonymous phone calls that they had received, so there was no disputing that those things had legitimately happened. Authorities hoped that the polygraph would just be one more pin in the validation map. Like, yep, she's telling the truth. The shit's happening. We got to figure it out. Interestingly, though, Nawrocki approached investigators as well and said, "Hey, can you also give me a polygraph? I've been linked to this smear campaign to destroy Chambers after this fucking Colonel Clink reference and this camera footage of me getting her mug. People were murmuring and she was keen to clear her name." And she
Yeah.
was like, "Hey, I had nothing to do with this. Can I please also take a polygraph?" So both Chambers and Nawrocki were polygraphed. Only one passed. The other had failed, especially when asked if they had any involvement in sending the letters or lewd photos. Who do you think failed?
I'm gonna say Chambers.
It was Nawrocki. Chambers passed with flying colors. Nawrocki
Whoa.
failed.
Okay.
Nawrocki was gobsmacked. She had been confident that by taking the polygraph, her name would be cleared, any suspicion that had been levied on her would be dissipating, and she would go back to normal life. She was so startled by her failure of the polygraph test that she told investigators, "Look, if I'm the one actually doing this stuff, I simply don't know that I'm doing it. You won't be able to prove it was me." Now, this statement could certainly be taken different ways.
Oh, for sure.
On the one hand, she could be like, if this is I don't know, I don't know that I'm doing it. I'm not doing it. On the other hand, she could be like, "Well, I obviously don't know I'm doing it, and you're never going to prove it." So, you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Fuck you guys.
Yeah. Nawrocki told Chief Anthony Flugo, who was part of the investigation, I think he was heading it up, that she needed his help. She was like, "Look, Flugy Flug,
Flugs.
this isn't me. This doesn't make any sense. I have had nothing to do with this. I don't care what your fucking polygraph says. I'm innocent. And I need you to really look into this because it's not me. And I need you to help me clear my name."
Plus, she came forward and was like, please give me a polygraph.
Yeah. And she was like, "It's not me. And you'll never prove it's me because you can't, because it's not me. So there's no way that you could prove that it was me." She shared with police that the only reason she took Chambers' coffee mug off of her desk is because Chambers asked her to get it for her. So if you roll the tape footage back on that hidden camera in Chambers' classroom, you can see Nawrocki and Chambers both together in Chambers' classroom. They were talking and like picked up some papers and they both left the classroom together. Within 30 seconds, you see Nawrocki walk back in directly to Chambers' desk, grab her mug, and walk directly back out.
Okay.
So she's like, "Look, I just went in to get her fucking mug because she asked me to, and that's what I get for being a nice person." You know what I mean? She
Right.
was like,
Yeah.
I didn't fucking do this, and the stupid mug thing is dumb. It's dumb. And I'm not even gonna talk about the Colonel Clink thing. I'm not even gonna grace that with a comment. Like, this is ridiculous." So Nawrocki's coffee mug explanation could be true. Chief Flugel told Nawrocki that, "Well, you're a really strong suspect, and I think it would be in your best interest to just confess and just stop with all this shenanigans and harassment against Chambers."
Whoa.
Now, this is 1993 we're in. Polygraphs were still considered science,
Right.
and they were taken much more seriously than they are today. Despite Nawrocki's seemingly genuine insistence that she was not involved, they still needed to clear her. Like, she was still on the suspect list. Nawrocki voluntarily consented to letting them search her home. They're like, "Hey, can we come in and search your home for any suspected evidence in the hopes of helping to clear your name?" And she's like, "Absolutely, get your asses in here and take anything you want." So they conducted a search on her home where they bagged different pieces of paper, different types of envelopes, and they took a typewriter. And their intent was to have all of these items forensically analyzed. What do you think the outcome of this analysis was?
Mm, no involvement at all. Nothing tying her.
You are correct. The different pieces of paper and envelopes that the investigators seized when they did their home search of her house did not match any of the different types of paper or envelopes that had been used to send the letters and lewd photos.
Okay. Okay.
The typewriter did not match the one used to type the letters. So, after a thorough house and search and investigation and forensic analysis, nothing investigators found, forensically or otherwise, tied Nawrocki to any part of the situation.
Wow. Okay.
Nawrocki could have been smart enough to not use anything in her home, though.
That's true.
So while this didn't prove anything, it also didn't prove anything.
Right.
For some unknown reason, no one analyzed Chambers' typewriter.
Ah, okay.
I don't know why. Maybe 1993 of it all? I don't know. Nevertheless, investigators were starting to believe that Nawrocki was behind this smear campaign. And they were starting to lean into the theory that Nawrocki was just fucking jealous of Chambers' loose and fun style of teaching, jealous of the popularity she had gained in just the 4 short years she had been teaching alongside Nawrocki at the elementary school. And as the letters continued, they turned even more menacing, outright accusing Chambers of molesting children.
Ooh.
This is fucking vicious. Vicious. At this point, Chambers was convinced that her career was ruined and that any day the police would arrest her and throw her in jail. She was a warm and empathetic teacher, and she regularly hugged her students. She regularly held them when they were crying, if they had a boo boo, or if somebody was being mean to them, or they were being bullied, or they forgot something, or whatever. So she was petrified because all it would take is one child being coached or being led to believe that Chambers had touched them inappropriately.
Right.
Boom, she's
Yeah.
done.
Damn.
After more than a year since the first letter was found on school grounds, the letters were still going strong and by now had morphed into full on death threats against Chambers.
Jesus.
Quote, "It's not over. You die." By now, Chambers had become so scared that she finally transferred to another school for her own protection. Investigators were convinced it was a fellow faculty member that was behind everything, so school officials took the precaution of getting Chambers out of the same space as the alleged perpetrator, which they still believed was Nawrocki.
Wow.
She was so scared, she being Chambers, that every day she would say goodbye to her husband and son, truly believing that it could potentially be her last day alive. She was fucking terrified.
Wow.
We're now in November of 1994. Chambers was driving down Interstate 380. It was daytime, and this was a route that was very familiar to Chambers. It's a common route, one that she drove all the time. A lot of people did. All of a sudden, she noticed a car approaching her from behind very rapidly, gaining on her very rapidly. And the car came up behind her and pulled out from behind and came up alongside her car and then swerved into her car, causing her to avoid the car by running off the road.
Oh shit.
It was clear to her that this car, her being Chambers, that this car intended to cause her to crash. Like, this car was trying to kill her. She managed to keep control of her car and she came to a very hard brake along the side of Interstate 380. And the car that swerved into her, it was like came up alongside her, hesitated a little bit, and then sped off. And Chambers saw who the driver was, made direct, lingering eye contact with this driver. And she was like, "Oh my God, that's Paula Nawrocki." And Chambers was like, "I will never, ever forget the look on her face." So by
Wow.
January 1995, police finally believe that they have enough evidence to arrest Nawrocki, which they did, and they charged her with harassment, stalking, simple and aggravated assault, making terroristic threats, and recklessly endangering the life of Joanne Chambers.
Damn.
They arrested her in her first grade classroom when they took her into custody. They were trying to make a statement. They were trying to make her an example.
In front of the kids?
I don't know if the class was in session at the time. I
Okay. So
couldn't
that's
figure that
kind
out.
of fucked up.
It's still, but she's walked out in handcuffs and people can see, and everybody's like hyper like cued into what's going on in Nawrocki's classroom, what's going on in Chambers' classroom. So they're all like paying attention. So
Ooh.
she was taken into custody. In all, Nawrocki was charged with over 100 counts, and she was suspended with pay from her job. She faced up to 5 years in jail as well as $10,000 for each count.
Damn.
Interestingly, when Nawrocki was arrested, everything stopped. No more letters, no more poopies, dolls, threats, razor blades, nothing. No more calls, no more hangups, nothing. And Nawrocki was like, "Oh, hell no." She continued to shout her innocence. After she was released on bail, she not only hired a lawyer, she hired a private investigator. I love PIs.
They get so much shit done.
Oh
It's
my God,
crazy.
because they don't have to follow the letter of the law.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, this investigator, this private investigator, his name was James Anderson, and he was a former statey. State police officers in the US are sometimes called staties. He was a former statey. And she didn't feel like the Coolbaugh Township Police Department was doing an adequate job. She didn't think Chief Flugo was like fluging it. And so she hired James Anderson to do an adequate and fair investigation to get to the bottom of who the fuck was behind this campaign to destroy Chambers so she could clear her name and be exonerated. She's like, I got to solve this case because this is not me. And in order to clear my name, I got to find out who it is. So let's get on it. P.I. Anderson told Nawrocki that the circumstances against her looked pretty grim. He kind of believed that she was guilty. You could very likely be convicted and do jail time. I'm not going to lie. Now, I will investigate your case, but I'm not going to lie. But he did admit that his first thought was that Nawrocki looked guilty. If you take all the evidence in its totality, circumstantial or otherwise, he's like,
Not
it looks
great.
real bad for her.
It's not great.
So, remember those partial fingerprints the FBI lifted from the letters and envelopes?
Yes.
Okay. They compared those fingerprints to Nawrocki's. What do you think the outcome was?
No match.
The fingerprints did not match Nawrocki's.
Okay.
So Nawrocki started pushing her defense team to get DNA analysis conducted on the letters and envelopes for DNA. Because she's like, look, this wasn't me. Whatever the fuck we got to do to clear my name, we're going to do it. So
Yeah.
I heard about this fandangled DNA shit. Let's do it. So DNA hit the scene in 1986, as I said earlier. And by 1994, where we are now, we're in, this was like November, January of 1995, November 1994, January 95. It was still in its infancy, but it worked if the sample size was big enough. The prosecution only agreed to let the defense conduct the analysis on the letters and envelopes if and only if the results of the test were fully disclosed, regardless whose fingerprints they turned out to be. Because the prosecution was convinced it was Nawrocki. So they were like, look, you can't keep this under wraps. Whoever it is, you got to tell it. And also, we're not going to pay for it. So Nawrocki has to pay for it.
Oh shit.
And oh, by the way, it's $7,000.
Fuck.
Which in today's money is about just shy of $15,000.
Mm.
And Nawrocki was like, fine, I'll absolutely pay for the test because I know those aren't my fingerprints. Private investigator Anderson was like, are you sure you want to do this? Because is there any reason why your fingerprints could be anywhere on those envelopes or letters? Did you handle them when you looked at them? Like, oh my gosh, what's this? Like, if your fingerprints are found, you're fucked. And she's like,
Yeah.
there is absolutely no way my fingerprints are anywhere on those letters and envelopes. Let's do this. And he's like, okay. So the defense team agreed, and the DNA analysis was performed. Forensic scientists were able to find DNA on the back of one set of 3 stamps. So there were like 3 stamps linked together, and they were licked and they were put on one of the bigger envelopes with like the nudie pics and stuff.
Okay.
So they did analysis on those, and they did analysis on, well, let's be real. They did analysis on everything, and it was one set of stamps, where it's one set of 3 stamps and one flap of envelope that they were actually able to get DNA from.
Okay.
So they did get stuff. Then they compared the results of the DNA profile on the stamps to Nawrocki's DNA, as well as that of her husband, Leonard. The DNA on the stamps did not match Nawrocki or her husband, Leonard.
Wow. Okay.
The DNA on the envelope flap was a much smaller sample, but it was large enough to conclusively rule out Nawrocki as having been the contributor of that DNA, and Leonard. Like, they were both ruled out, but it was too small to like be conclusive, but they were able to be ruled out. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
DNA is confusing to me. Why the fuck was Nawrocki required to pay for the DNA test? Why wasn't that considered part of a thorough investigation and paid for by the police or the defense, the investigating agencies? Like, I don't understand it. Because otherwise, if she didn't pay for it, they wouldn't have done it.
It's like, I'll solve your case for you. Fuck you guys.
Yeah. That blows my mind. Anyway, now that the defense team had the DNA of the stalker, and now that they knew conclusively that neither Nawrocki nor her husband were the contributors of that DNA profile, they knew that Nawrocki was innocent. Because at first, the defense team was like, this bitch is fucking crazy and she is guilty as motherfucking hell. Now, the defense team and PI Anderson are like, oh my gosh, she is
She's telling the
innocent.
truth.
She's
Yeah.
telling the fucking truth. So they were like, okay, we totally hands down believe you. So then they were like, well, then who the fuck is it? They were starting to think that the only other person that could have contributed the DNA had to have been Chambers. It had to have been. She was the only other person that knew all the details of the circumstances that had taken place over the last year and a half, and the only other person that had access to all of that stuff because she received everything. Like some
Right.
parents received some letters and some faculty members received some letters, but she received a copy of everything,
Okay.
either delivered to her at the school, delivered to her home, put in her mailbox, on her yard, whatever. So the defense team is like, oh my gosh, it has to be Chambers. So they started to believe that Chambers herself was actually the stalker, typing and mailing the incriminating letters to herself, to the school, to parents, to other faculty members, that it was all Chambers. That's what the defense team is like. Oh my God, they had an epiphany. It's Chambers. Holy shit.
Wow.
And I think they're thinking that because they're like, what's our fucking defense going to be against Nawrocki? All we have to do is prove reasonable doubt.
Yeah.
So how are we going to do that? I know. Let's say it's Chambers. Perfect. This shift in thinking put the defense team on the offensive. They began working with authorities to start investigating Chambers herself because nobody's looked into Chambers up to this point. It's all been Nawrocki is the crazy bitch that's stalking Chambers. It's
Right.
all about
Yeah.
Nawrocki. And they learned something interesting. Prior to Chambers joining the Coolbaugh Learning Center elementary school, she lived in Carbondale, Pennsylvania, which is a town adjacent to Tobyhanna. The Carbondale police shared with investigators that Chambers and her husband had a history of reporting suspicious activity directed toward her. She reported everything from burglary to arson, and it seemed like every situation she reported to the Carbondale police had some level of fucking strangeness to it, which was just fucking weird. PI Anderson started reviewing the files he received from the Carbondale police and discovered that Chambers had reported 16 previous instances when Chambers reported to the authorities that she was the victim of anonymous threats and violence.
Whoa.
16 reports, separate
Damn.
reports. She had reported that she had found poopies on her classroom chair when she was teaching in another school district years prior before moving to the Pocono Mountain School District to teach at Coolbaugh Learning Center.
Whoa.
So, the records that P.I. Anderson got clearly showed Chambers had a track record of reporting crimes of which she was a victim. Now, one could argue that she really was a victim, and when she moved to Coolbaugh, her stalker didn't stop. Her
True.
stalker just followed her. So the defense team wanted to compare DNA, Chambers's DNA against the profile that they had on the stamps and envelope flap, but they didn't want to alert Chambers to what they were doing. So they waited for her to put her trash out on the curb one day because once you, as a citizen, put your trash on the curb, it is now considered public property and you have
Right.
no rights to it. At least in the United States, that's how the law works with trash. And in the middle of the night, one night, P.I. Anderson went through her trash looking for samples of DNA that they could use to compare against the profile that they had of the perpetrator from the stamps in the envelope flap.
Okay.
And they collected a number of items. Think like tissues, Q-tips,
Mm,
straws,
yeah.
dental floss, all of
Cups.
that kind of
Yeah.
shit. Just the thought of going through trash just is so gross.
It's not doing much for me either.
So, when forensic scientists analyzed the various items that P.I. Anderson had collected from Chambers's trash, the results came back that there were two different DNA profiles on the items, one male and one female. Makes sense. There's Chambers and her husband, their son.
Yeah.
The female profile was a match to the DNA on the stamps and could not be excluded as having been the contributor to the DNA on the envelope flap. They couldn't
Oh,
match it
shit.
to the envelope flap, but they couldn't be excluded. The defense team was fucking elated and they were like, all right, that's it. Hey, prosecution team, we demand that you drop all charges against our client, Nawrocki, and that we just end this now, given this new evidence. And the prosecution was like, fuck you, we're going to trial.
What?
Meanwhile, Chambers voluntarily provided a blood sample to further narrow down who in the Chambers home was the contributor of the DNA profile that matched the DNA profile on the stamps. Now, there was no other woman that lived in Chambers's home, but she did have friends that would occasionally, and they had like tissues and drinking straws and, non
Right.
personal hygiene things that they took samples from. So she voluntarily, she was like, why don't I give you my blood? That way you can match it and rule me out.
Yeah.
Chambers's DNA profile perfectly matched the
Oh.
DNA on the stamps and again could not be excluded from having been the donor to the DNA on the envelope flap.
Oh, Chambers.
So even after this, the defense was like, all right, prossies, let's go ahead and drop this case now. And the prossies were like, fuck you. We're not dropping this case. We're going to trial.
Fuck.
Yeah. Now, mind you, it's Nawrocki on trial here.
Yeah. Oh my
Nawrocki's trial
god.
started January 15th, 1996. So now we're like coming up on 3 years after this whole smear campaign started. So this has been going on for a really long time.
And has she been in jail this whole time? Or was
No, she was out on
she
bail.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. The prosecution's case was largely circumstantial. They focused on the camera footage of Nawrocki taking Chambers's coffee mug off her classroom desk just shortly after the foreboding letters that talked about poisoning Chambers's coffee and the Colonel Klink reference in one of the letters that allegedly tied Nawrocki to the incidents because she had previously been overheard referring to the school superintendent as Colonel Klink. When Chambers took the stand to testify against Nawrocki, her performance was highly underwhelming and actually served to hurt her more than help her. Her responses were erratic, with differing emotions ranging from super sad to withdrawn and like subdued to fucking angry and agitated. Jurors were said to have struggled believing she was innocent because of her behavior on the stand.
Hmm.
They said that they saw her often roll her eyes and appear annoyed. So the
Hmm.
defense, meanwhile, had a stronger case because they actually took their time to develop forensic analysis and get some results.
Yeah.
This forensic analysis exonerated Nawrocki as having been contributor of the DNA.
Yeah.
And it showed Chambers was the contributor to the DNA
Yeah.
or of the DNA. And in a shocking turn of events, the defense implicated Chambers during the trial as having been the perpetrator behind the letters and events against herself. The principal at the school Chambers had taught at years prior testified for the defense about an incident with Chambers in the early 80s where she had told him that someone had smeared poopies all over her classroom chair and she was covered in it and needed to go home and shower and change. This would be the third poopies incident.
Okay.
The
Yeah.
jury was stunned, to say the least. But really, it was the DNA results that were the bombshell of the trial
Yeah.
because the jury didn't know any of it. And when the defense presented it, the jury was like, are you fucking kidding me? Chambers testified that the reason why her DNA was on the stamps was because she had been left alone with the envelopes with a huge stack of very key evidence. She had been left alone with this evidence in a police interrogation room, and the stamps fell off. They were sitting there and they jumped off the envelope. She didn't
Ooh.
cause that. They just jumped off. She
Oh
didn't touch
man.
it, nothing. So she licked them to reattach them, but they didn't stay on. So she took out a glue stick from her bag and she glued them and then she stuck them
Oh,
back on so that they would stay. That's the
okay.
only reason why her DNA was on those stamps.
What an angel.
She really is benevolent.
Yeah.
The prosecution never offered up an explanation for why or how Chambers had been left alone with extremely key evidence when the police are saying, yeah, that didn't fucking happen. And if this is true and the police are lying to cover it up, she exhibited ungodly poor judgment.
Right. Yeah.
And she tampered with evidence. Even if not intentionally, she tampered with evidence. And if you were being embroiled in this thing, this saga that's been going on for 3 years, and the police are involved and there's prosecution and defense, would you touch key evidence? I wouldn't fucking touch a thing.
No, I would not.
But then the defense called Dr. Lichtenwalner.
Oh,
So the defense called Dr. Lichtenwalner to the
pretty.
stand.
Okay.
And this was the forensic scientist that conducted the DNA analysis on the stamps in the envelope flap. And she testified, that's right, she
Yeah.
testified that she found no evidence of glue or glue stick residue on the stamps, refuting Chambers's claim that she had glued the stamps back on.
Right.
Interestingly and highly unfortunate for Chambers, Dr. Lichtenwalner happened to be a lifelong stamp collector. And she was very skilled at differentiating glue from stamp adhesive. And also, she was a fucking forensic scientist and could tell the difference between glue and stamp adhesive.
Right. Oh my God.
If there had been glue, it would have shown as bluish under UV light. And when the stamps were exposed to UV light during analysis, there was no blue residue present, indicating there was no glue on the stamps.
Wow.
The defense also offered up the motive that Chambers was harassing herself and framing Nawrocki, all to get attention and sympathy from coworkers, parents, students, and the community because it worked for her in the past and she loved it, and so she was going to do it again. Additionally, they called several character witnesses that testified on behalf of Nawrocki's character, as well as several witnesses that testified against Chambers's character.
Shit.
Two such witnesses, Jane Pardue and Lois Rendar, testified that Chambers was known for telling stories and lies. So Jane and Lois were educators that used to work with Chambers many years ago in a different school district. The school district that she
Okay.
was in previously before joining Pocono Mountain School District. So Jane and Lois worked with her. Lois described a story Chambers once told about studying to become a nun and how
That's
she broke her leg jumping out of a window because she was trying to escape the convent and she was being chased by nuns who were trying to prevent her from leaving the convent.
okay.
I'm just going to set that right there for a moment.
Yeah.
No? You're not, but
No.
no, no, okay. She
Nope.
also testified, this is Lois Render, that the school where they taught was a peaceful and harmonious place, but that all changed when Chambers joined the faculty. And that's when tons of drama, just really fucking petty drama started to take place. And
Yikes.
as shit started snowballing, everybody was looking at each other going like, this never happened before Chambers started here. And now that Chambers is here, there's all this shit. I think the
Right?
common denominator is Chambers. So, on January 22nd, 1996, the jury in Nawrocki's trial deliberated for 2 hours, 2 whole hours before returning a verdict.
Okay.
2 hours. What do you think the verdict was against Nawrocki?
Guilty.
She was found not guilty.
Oh, okay, good. That's what I was hoping for, but this has been
So,
like back and forth the entire
I
time.
know. She was exonerated on every single charge.
Okay, good.
She was acquitted of all charges. The defense had done such a good job presenting its evidence and casting doubt on Chambers' innocence that by the end of the trial, the vibe in the courtroom was such that Nawrocki was the victim and Chambers was the perpetrator.
Wow.
Jurors even went up to Nawrocki after the trial was over and hugged her and told her how sorry they were that she had had to go through all of that and that they loved her.
That's crazy. They should have a bake sale to make back that 15,000 she spent on it.
Fucking bake sale. Meanwhile, Chambers walked out of the courthouse without anyone approaching her or talking to her. She was
Well,
completely ignored.
that sounds about right.
To this day, Chambers denies she had anything to do with the smear campaign against her. In all, Nawrocki spent more than 100,000 big ones on her legal defense and scientific defense.
Oh my God.
$100,000.
Fuck.
Despite her acquittal on all charges, she was required to attend a school board hearing to determine if she could indeed return to her teaching job. She was being accused in this school board hearing of immorality and dishonesty.
Oh my God.
So basically, it became a recreation of the criminal trial. It was
Yeah.
fucking bonkers. On April 2nd, 1997, so now we're like 4+ years down the road, Nawrocki was acquitted on all charges and was allowed to keep her job.
Okay,
But she had
good.
to go through another like quasi trial for that to
Right.
happen. And because there wasn't overwhelming evidence to suggest Chambers really was the one behind her own harassment, although I beg to differ, she was also allowed to keep her teaching job. However, they were no longer teaching in the same school.
Good.
After the trial, Nawrocki filed legal paperwork regarding her intent to sue Chambers, Chief Anthony Flugel, and the Pocono Mountain School District for their culpability in and treatment of her during the smear campaign against Chambers and the subsequent investigation. In November 2000, Nawrocki received a $600,000 settlement from the Pocono Mountain School District.
Good for
Chambers
her.
was also legally required Chambers Okay. Chambers was also legally required to pay Nawrocki a $25,000 settlement when Nawrocki went after her for damages, seeking a recoupment for all the costs that she had to pay during the trial. Because again,
Yeah.
Nawrocki paid more than $100,000 for her
Oh my
defense.
God. That's crazy.
Nawrocki also filed suit to sue the pants off of Chief Anthony Flugel for defamation by prosecuting without sufficient probable cause. Basically, she was like, look, you defamed my character. You did not have probable cause. And so I'm suing you. Fuck
Yeah.
you. I'm suing you for damages. Her suit was denied, with Chief Flugel being acquitted on all charges of defamation on December 12th, 2000. The reason was because probable cause had already been established, and it wasn't Chief Flugel that established that probable cause that allowed them to go to trial, and because he was simply doing his job to solve the case. He was working in the capacity of the Coolbaugh Township Police Department.
Hmm. Okay.
So I was like, wow, that is fucked up. So where are Chambers and Nawrocki today? I was like, where are they? Like, what's going on? They're still alive.
Where are
Like,
they
what's yeah?
now?
Are
Mm-hmm.
they friends? They're not friends.
Didn't
Both
think
went on to
so.
continue teaching at different schools, and they both had successful careers. By late 2001, Nawrocki was teaching third grade. She has since stayed out of the public eye and has no known social media presence.
Okay.
So you can't really find anything on her. In 2014, Chambers retired from teaching, and by all accounts, she had a very celebrated career and she became a certified something or other. And she too has largely stayed out of the public eye.
Hmm.
Now, I did find an article about in the mid to late 2000 teens, Nawrocki applied to be on the school board, and the application was stalled because of this situation for which she was acquitted.
Right.
And her application was ultimately denied because of this situation,
Wow.
even though she was fully acquitted and exonerated of all
That
charges.
sucks.
So she was pissed. So
Yeah.
that was fucked up. It was
Hmm.
never legally determined who was behind the smear campaign against Chambers. So technically, the case remains unsolved. But interestingly, every single assault, every single letter, every single incident ended and never occurred again after the trial.
Hmm.
And that is the she said stalking story of Joanne Chambers and Paula Nawrocki.
Wow. That's wild.
What are your thoughts? Do you think it was Chambers? Do you think it was Nawrocki? Do you think it was
Absolute.
somebody else?
No, I totally think it was Chambers.
You do why?
Just because it happened so often in different situations in different schools. No one was ever caught. It just kind of seemed to just follow her. And I don't know. what she was gaining from it, just sympathy, support, whatever it might have been, but it just seemed like she got off on it somehow. She liked being the attention and being
Yeah.
the victim and like, oh my god, and people coming to her aid and like whatever. I just think that yeah, she something in her just kept creating these situations. I don't
Yeah.
know
I
why
agree with you.
she decided to sit and shit. Like she made that choice. I feel like
I
she brought in a bag of shit and then was like, "Ah, multiple times. Who fucking does that?" Ugh.
the other thing I find interesting is that the camera was installed in her classroom because so much shit was happening in her classroom and nothing was caught on the video surveillance except for Nawrocki getting her mug, of which apparently Chambers asked her to get the mug
Right.
like a day or two after the incriminating letters or the threatening letters of I could have poisoned your coffee 4 times this week.
Yeah, and that other teacher that had heard her say Colonel Clink or whatever may have just relayed that story to Chambers and she was like, "Holy shit, I'm going to take that and I'm going to use it and it's going to be
I
like these little
I
ties that
absolutely believe so.
yeah."
I I got caught in a Reddit hole. So,
Okay.
um,
Ouch.
fans of Forensic Files love this episode, and I agree with them. This is one of my ultimate favorite episodes that Forensic Files has produced. It was because Chambers and Nawrocki were extensively interviewed for the episode.
Mm, okay.
And when you see Chambers and when you see Nawrocki, they couldn't be any more different. It's so
Yeah.
interesting.
Huh.
Allegedly, so going down this Reddit hole to get back to that, and many other sources that I found was that Nawrocki wasn't charmed by Chambers and didn't
Mm,
like give in to her or like create this like crazy friendship bond or whatever. And so Naraki was someone that was immune to Chambers' charm and wit and fun-loving character, and that really fucking bothered Chambers. And so she's like, "Fine, fuck you. I'm gonna go ahead and take you down. I'm gonna fuck
right.
up your reputation. I'm gonna screw up your professional career. I'm gonna take you down." And it didn't work because Naraki fought back. She's like, "Nah, bitch."
Mm-mm. Wow, that is crazy.
In the end, aside from reputation, feelings, not a whole lot of yuck happened to Nawaki. She still got to keep her job. I'll bet she had to jump through some hoops. Yes, that fucking
Yeah.
sucked, but she got to keep her job. She was suspended with pay, so she wasn't put out that way economically. She got back to teaching and she was able to get back to her life. No one was harmed truly. And if Chambers really was behind her own stalking, she did all that to herself. So
Yeah.
in a way, no one was harmed because she harmed
Right. Yeah.
herself if that was the case.
Ay, ay, ay.
Yeah,
That
it's
was
crazy.
fucking interesting.
Yeah. As always, please rate, review, subscribe if you like us. We're on YouTube. We're anywhere you get your podcasts. You got case suggestions? Throw them over to us. Crimewilltellpod@gmail.com.
Yeah. And please follow us on Facebook, Instagram. Keep sharing with people. That's the best way to kind of spread the word. Plus, rating the show and leaving positive reviews also really help kind of get our name out there and help us grow. So if you can do that, we would greatly appreciate it. But
Yeah.
yeah, thank you guys for listening.
Thank you so much for listening. And with that, bye bye, James.
Goodbye, Carrie. You make my heart happy.
Well, do you want to clap?
No, let's not. We're not doing that.
It was all about the boobies.
You coming over to my side, girl?
So if that annoys you, you'd be like, dude, get your hands off my shit.
Boop. Thank you.
I think it just fucking happened.
Jesus Christ.
Let me take a drink of my Burby Burb.
Or we can have a fucking party.
Okay.
Oh my god. Look at you. Look at you.
She's got poopies.
That's okay.